How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Ganji. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Guys, today we're going to talk about behind the mask, how correctional officers or correctional staff in general kind of see what criminals hide. And it's a discussion me and Russ have had many times. I believe that we should be more involved when it comes to criminal research, more importantly, the criminal mind, the psychology behind why criminals do what they do. I think people that work in corrections are placed in a perfect position to truly have an understanding of how the criminal mind may work, especially because we're there day by day through the routine of what we do. So I think it's going to be a great dialogue. We'll kind of spell out what we feel that we can add to the table. And again, this isn't about making diagnoses. This is just about trying to give people an understanding of the behavior through what we've been through in our experiences. My experience over 22 years and Russ, who has over 30 something by now. All right. And guys, don't forget, guys, I do have books on the market. A list of my books are in the description of the show. I have everything from inmate manipulation to just tips and advice for supervisors and rookies. The list goes on. So please check out the links, and I'm sure you'll find, I think I have 7 books. So I'm sure some of those books will meet your needs. All right, let me get Russ on. What up, Russ?
Anthony, how are you doing tonight, sir?
Good. Russ, you mind introducing yourself, sir?
Not at all. My name is Russ Hamilton. I am a former and retired sergeant from California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I am also a former senior juvenile correctional officer. I currently work for a company that does reentry and rehabilitation work at a local county jail where I'm the case manager, and also for a local county probation department. I am also the founder of Keepers of Chaos on Facebook, and Keepers of Chaos is a forum devoted to people who work in the correctional field, no matter what function they serve at. And that's in order to be able to mentor them, to be able to train them, to give them support, to share knowledge and understanding, history, and everything else related to the correctional world.
Yeah, and guys, I think me and Russ are going to work together, hopefully, on a book on manipulation. We're going to try to utilize our experiences and then go ahead and see how those experiences translate to the outside world. I think it'll be a great book, and I think that's a book that's going to be meant for a broader audience. So once the book is done, we'll go ahead and seek a good publisher who can definitely get that book out to that broader audience. Now, guys, so we've been doing a lot of shows lately on not just correctional stuff, but because we do have a lot of people that come in that follow true crime, we've been trying to do shows that could hit their interest, but doesn't actually go so far out of our expertise. Me and Russ, Joe, the people that come on my channel, we know where our wheelhouse is. Now, with that said, I've had people that put comments in. Most of them are people that enjoy it, so that's a good thing. And even professionals in the mental health business also say, wow, this is great insight. So it's great. The comments or the feedback is very good. But once in a while, you do get some comments that I don't think they're being disrespectful, but they're just more asking, like, what gives you guys, I guess if they're comparing it to academia, however they compare wherever the experience is, technically what gives you guys the right to discuss these topics. So with that said, guys, we don't touch on things that are academic. We're not sitting there saying that these people have these types of diagnoses, but what we do is we talk about behaviors. And the reason why I feel comfortable in doing that is because when you work in corrections, whether you're a correctional officer, correctional staff management, whatever role you tend to play, you are gonna, for most of the time, gonna present conflict to those inmates. There's a lot of inmates that are looking to manipulate. So their main objective is to try to circumvent the rules and regulations. And we in corrections, we are not afraid of conflict. That is our job for the most part, and obviously in corrections, you got to have that backbone. So with that said, you have us willing to engage in conflict. That means we're willing to tell somebody no. But there's another unique aspect to working in prison and jail is that we have duration. That means that these inmates, the ones that choose to manipulate, will try to build relationships. Will try to develop relationships that pull staff out of their prescribed role. So we are very in tune with the games that are played. We're very in tune with, basically when to say no. very in tune with different types of motives. And with us in corrections, guys, once you tell a manipulator no, and you become that dead end, and that no is supported at every level, their mask comes off. They expose who they really are. And I think it's those engagements that have allowed us in corrections to truly understand the criminal mind. It even goes way past just manipulation, even though we have a lot of discussions on manipulation, because that seems to be the center of how the criminal mind works. Because again, it's about getting what they want and basically utilizing anybody to get that. So with that said, Russ, I do believe that we are in a very good area or experience of a very good area where we have the expertise and the experience to kind of discuss motives or kind of discuss the meaning why they could be doing these types of behaviors, because routine day to day, I mean, ain't this what we deal with?
Yeah, when you look at it from a position of familiarity, and familiarity is the right word in this case. These particular individuals are put in a position where they encounter us each and every day. They may get to know us on a better level than they probably should. Some of that perhaps due to the individuals that are working in the field, and some of it perhaps just due to the amount of exposure that you get with these individuals on a day-to-day basis. And so what happens is these individuals will drop their guard for us. They will let us see what they really are like. And this is done because of the conflict, because of the amount of exposure that they have to us, and the fact that there is a familiarity that happens in this case. And, familiarity breeds complacency. And that's often the times where they step out of the mask that they put up, and they reveal what their true selves are. And so we get a chance to see that when they're encountering mental health professionals or just physicians, other health professionals, and so forth. They can put forth any type of facade that they want to. They can put up that barrier, that veneer, if you will, in a way that allows them to manipulate those people perhaps more effectively. With us, because they are around us for such a long portion of each day, I believe that becomes harder. Now, there are some staff that are good at catching those glimpses and seeing behind that mask. And there's probably some other staff that aren't as good about it, that don't really understand what they're seeing, or just aren't hip to doing the types of deep level observations that I and a lot of the people that I worked with did. And I'm sure with yourself and a lot of the people that you worked with. So it's something that you have to learn. It's something you have to practice. It's something you have to be intentional about. But it does give us a glimpse, perhaps like no other, especially when you work areas that, with some really, heinous type individuals like death row, for instance.
And Russ, I like how you said complacency, because I never thought of it that way. Like I definitely agree. I know that obviously if we become that brick wall and they can't get what they want, I usually believe the exhaustive measure is to try to intimidate or fear, and however that can come. That could just be as something as passive as, I guess I'll have to call my lawyer, or I guess I'll have to call my parents. I mean, or my family. I mean, it's not always, I'm going to kill you. I mean, to be honest with you, that's really not the go-to. The go-to is usually the legal side of things, and hoping that we're going to step down. And again, that's the point when you raise up, there's nothing I'm doing wrong, so I'm going to go ahead and challenge your position of calling the legal system. But with that said, I like the complacent avenue, because you figure the complacent avenue is, usually I believe that people that manipulate the criminal mind always has to be on guard. And then basically, I'm assuming that could be extremely tiring for them. Especially because they have to try to carry a persona that they may not really internalize. And that could be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I truly believe that, like you said, if you observe it long enough, there could be areas where they could become complacent, or just, not thinking. And then you wind up get a little glimpse of something that you may not see all the time. I like that complacent thought, Russ.
Yeah, and and that's I think that's born of the fact that they can get ready for and they can stand up to any amount of scrutiny or putting that facade forward. With what would you say, like a counseling appointment or whatever, where they're only there in the room for an hour or 2 hours at the most, but with us they're there all day.
Yeah, and as I said, I like that. I put on the bottom here that the correctional staff daily exposure to inmate behavior. I think that's one of the big things here that help us get in tune with basically dealing with that criminal mind, because again, we're dealing with them routine behavior. This is the everyday. I mean, this is, basically we're in their element. They're not in ours. We are in theirs. And I think that's the big difference. I mean, I know, like Russ said, yeah, you do have the people that may come in and try to interview the inmate or try to interview the person who committed the crimes on the streets, and they try to get an understanding of why they did what they did. And a lot of it is a focus backwards when they're actually, it looks like someone's coming in behind you, Russ.
Yes, that would be my wife delivering my coffee.
Well, we said hi. It looks like when they do it, obviously they got it. They're kind of looking backwards and trying to understand why. But our job when we work in corrections is we're in the moment. We're living and breathing everything in the moment. So with that said, guys, we are figuring out things as they come. We are actually engaged with the inmate population, and eventually, like Russ said, the complacency. Eventually, the more you walk around, the more you start seeing things that they may not want you to see, but they're going to give it a shot because they may have to do these things. And Russ, I got to tell you something. That makes us that makes us a bit different than those that just come in and try to get a glimpse and use that hour and a half to try to say that they truly understand the dynamic of the criminal mind. Where, in my opinion, when they're being interviewed and they decide to, like, maybe ask questions and go back and to try to go into that childhood, that Sigmund Freud type psychoanalytics or analysis. The funny thing about that is, I think because in my mind they still try to utilize that as excuses. Like, I really truly believe that when they have those dialogues and they start to try to bring out the why, and the criminal there may know that, what, I don't want to be seen as a demon or someone that's purely evil. So at this point, they got me dead to rights. So I'm going to start off with coming off with excuses for my behavior. So therefore, now you start going into this this nurture dialogue, which is basically what happened to them as children, and that's what made them who they are. And I think, to me, the psychology behind all that, I get it. Maybe most of them do have this problematic childhood, but when you ask them in the moment, I feel that it's not coming up because it's what made them who they are. I think it's coming up because it's their chance to provide excuses to some level save face.
Yeah, the other thing I think that's worth pointing out is it's not just the interactions that we have with them, but our ability to monitor and look at all of the interactions that they have with each other. I mean, just look at the power dynamics that happen, especially them among themselves within their gang, their STG, if you will. And we get to see, how they act amongst those people who are their peers, their shot callers, their underlings, their lieutenants, and everything else. And we get to watch them, order hits or, attack other groups, or sometimes just, even the conversation that they carry on, watching these guys, talk to each other, about white power, or watching them, talk about, being a Crip or a Blood or a Sereno or a Norteño or whatever it is. And we get to listen to all of that stuff. We get to see how they act. We get to intercept a lot of times their messages. Sometimes we get to hear phone calls that they're having with other individuals. And so our exposure to it is at a deeper, more substantial and undiluted you know, type of thing, where we really get a dose of that. And I think that that should put our understanding, you know, far surpassing, I believe, a lot of, you know, academia, you know, or mental health professionals, at least to the point where we understand it at our level, we understand it at their level, and we're able to, you know, kind of pick things apart. And so those of us who have used that to our advantage to try and get ahead of the game, I think, are especially sensitive to what's going on in our environment. And oftentimes we're able to take that and capitalize on it.
Yeah, and I also want to add, don't forget, guys, we're learning why we're in the feeling of survival mode. So we're extremely hypersensitive and very, very intuitive, which means, I mean, if you want to be a psychologist that comes in, that's great. Do your research, do what you got to do, write your books. I get it. But then that person's going to come right back into our environment, and we have to observe. That's our job. I mean, when we're there, we have to observe that person for 8 to 16 hours a day. Observe one of many. But the key, like Russ said too, is it's not just even about observing the person, because the funny thing is when the psychologists do those interviews, or the psychiatrists, whoever's writing their next book, and by the way, that's not to minimize what they do, because we need that side of academia. I get it. But I just want people to be mindful. They're talking to the individual, and I get it. But like Russ said, we also watch their interactions. I think that's something that they're not going to be privy to like we are. And I think it's the interactions that matter, because you could see in the interactions how they shift and adjust. You could see it playing out all day, you know, depending on who they're talking to or what they need to do. You can see the shifting and adjusting, the patterns of behavior. And then you're just watching them. And one inmate will be 20 different people to 20 different people. I mean, it's just a matter of how they need to maneuver from the daily routines they have with us, to the daily routines they have with each other, to the daily routines they have with the counselors. I mean, there's just so many areas of situations that we actually observe them in. And I think that gives us a tremendous advantage when it comes to understanding them in their setting. So having said that, yeah, you're the psychologist and the psychiatrist, and you're interviewing them, and you're trying to, you know, kind of understand who they are. And that's great. I mean, they could tell you who they are all day, but once you put them back in that prison sitting, wow, once you put them back in that prison setting, and then they start to have interactions, we don't look for them to tell us who they are. We look to see what's being exposed. And to me, that's the reality. That's where you start to find out who you're dealing with. Would you agree with that, Russ?
Yeah, and that's the key to this whole discussion that we're having tonight, is what our role is in understanding and interpreting, you know, what the criminal mind is like. I think that puts us in a better position, you know, to make assessments, a better position to be able to, you know, talk about, you know, what is going to be done with regard to safety and security. And last but not least, what's going to be done with regards to the type of inroads that we want to make with reentry and rehabilitation. I don't think that ours is the most important role with regards to that, but I think ours might be the most important as far as observation goes, and our ability to assess whether something is really going to be helpful with regards to reentry and rehabilitation, or if it's going to be, you know, antithetical to it. Because I think too many times you get people that are trying to satisfy the individual needs of these inmates, and accountability is the first thing to suffer. And then all of the discipline and all the other things that go along with that. And we're no longer trying to help them, you know, back into society. We're trying to help them get back to society without any of that additional, you know, learning and skill sets and things like that that should go along with reentry and rehabilitation. And I see that a lot in the role that I fulfill now. In that, like coming up in California right now, and we may do a little video on this. They are trying to make it so inmates do not have to work if they don't want to, or if they do get paid, that they make an enormous amount of money, or at least at the minimum wage side. And my point about that whole thing is so we're taking away their ability to make restitution. We're taking away the responsibility that they have to not incur, larger amounts of debt on the California taxpayer. And all these other people, they just start scratching their heads when you bring this stuff up. And what they wanted to do is they just wanted to relieve the inmates of any responsibility for their past actions whatsoever. And I think that this is why conversations like this are so key, is because we know perhaps better than most what it takes to make forward progress with regards to if we're going to do any type of rehabilitation or reentry at all. And I'm not saying that every inmate is a candidate for that, but if we're going to offer that at all, if we're going to offer it to at least some inmates, we should do it in a way that's at least efficacious and not blinded by just, say, well, we're just going to help this guy out, help him out, but at what cost?
Yeah. And guys, when the person being, let's say the inmate, the criminal, or we're using the word inmate, but technically when they're being interviewed, if you want to call them a subject, I don't know, their job is to paint a perspective that they want out into the world. And that may be something at that moment that they have a little bit of control of, because again, there's really no pressure. They answer the questions they want to answer. They don't answer the questions they don't want to answer. And there's just no pressure. So again, they paint the perspective, they control the narrative. But when they get back, when they get back into that prison setting, they don't control the narrative. They're not in control of painting that perspective. I mean, to be honest, I wish we were just a bit more, but we're not either. Basically, the situation paints the perspective, and our job is to objectively look at things and basically kind of get our determination of who these people are through their interactions on a daily basis. And when you have the people that come into the facilities that believe that they have an understanding of who these individuals are, because they may understand their background, I think, to be honest with you, for the most part, I don't think the background is as heavy as people may think it is. I think, to be honest with you, and I don't want this to sound harsh, but I just want to put a perspective out there. I think, to be honest with you, when you look at when people are discussing the background, they're discussing the background when they're supposed to be held accountable for something. So sometimes when they feel that the evidence is against them, they feel that they can minimize it by, I think, claiming the victim or shifting blame somewhere. Yeah, I raped these individuals because I was raped when I was a child, and that's horrible that happened to you as a child. But that shouldn't minimize the accountability in this moment. I mean, if anything, I would think that if someone did something so horrific to you, then you would try to break away from that. If it was that powerful, if it had that powerful of an effect, because I'm thinking in that case there, you would not want to have somebody else go through what you've been through. But again, I think, unfortunately, we lean a lot on these backgrounds to try to help us determine who these people are and why they've done what they've done, where, to be honest with you, their criminal mind is not just about, that murder or that and some of the stuff we're watching, that murder or that rape. I mean, their mind is set as a criminal. They steal, they lie. I mean, it's not just that, my daddy raped me and I became a raper. Okay, but how do you explain your theft? How do you explain every day that you lie all the time, that you manipulate all the time? I mean, yeah, you may want to use this as an excuse, and I get it, but there's other criminal behaviors that you commit yourself to that, you weren't exposed to. So how much of it is, what was done onto you, or how much is it that you decided to cultivate and become this person that you're trying to say society is responsible for? Does that make sense for us?
Yeah, I think, one thing that I talk a lot about, whether it's to my colleagues or sometimes with these individuals, is, the whole idea behind the antisocial criminal mindset that we see. And these people, these whether they're inmates, whether they're probationees, whether they're on parole, all of those things. What you really have to look at is the fact that they run and have a lifestyle and an attitude and a set of specific behavioral things that is antithetical towards what society accepts as the norm. The first one among which is almost always some form of substance use and abuse. And then beyond that, it is the other things like, the propensity for committing crimes, which might be, kiting checks. It might be stealing stuff. It might be doing stick ups. It could be any number of things, but all of these things run counter towards what we want to accept in society. And so it's just a matter of, we know that these people have that mindset, that they have this antisocial criminal personality defect going on, and that has to be treated. That has to be, something that is dealt with if we're looking at it from the perspective of of reentry and rehabilitation. Now, when it comes to inside the prison, some of these people are never getting out, right? But does that mean that we want to give them some treatment? Of course we do, because we want them to be more manageable within the population. And some become manageable, some already are manageable, some will never become manageable within those confines, and they will always have not just an antisocial criminal personality, but they will have a violent antisocial criminal personality. So there's a lot to this, and there's a lot of reasons why we want to be on top of this. There's a lot of reasons why we want to know what's making them tick, because if we know what's making them tick, even if we can't provide any type of treatment for it, we can be ahead of it, and we can counter it, and we can better protect the public, better protect our staff, and better protect other inmates.
Yeah, and guys, I mean, there are many that know what they've done is wrong, take on full accountability, and even in the end, if people ask them, about their childhood, they'll speak on it, but they also still take onus of the choices that they made and the situation that they put themselves in. So, yeah, they may have had a troubled childhood, but they still take on full accountability of what they've done. And I truly believe in my heart of hearts that true change does come when the person takes on full accountability without having to look backwards for excuses as to what they've done. And I think a lot of the people that may come in that want to write their books and sell their theories, they come in already with a mindset that they want this person to fit. So they'll find something. They'll just find something that fits that explains why they've done something 30 years later. Something, I know when they said Ted Bundy, well, something was weird because when he was a kid, his I don't know, his aunt or somebody or his whatever was laying on, I think the aunt was laying on her bed, and he came with a bunch of knives and laid them across the table or whatever, or laid them across the bed. Okay, what's the context? I get it, but kids do weird things all the time. One time my daughter got mad at my other daughter, and without her realizing, she almost pushed my other daughter down the stairs. I mean, holy crap. Should I hold that against her 30 years from now and utilize that as a way to justify, God forbid, if she ever does anything wrong? I think we tend to look back and look for these moments and then create context around these moments where just to fit your theory, which rather could have been just superficial or situational. So with that said, I think the best way of understanding who somebody is who they are in the moment. I truly believe that, because knowing who they are in the moment truly can let us know, through their interactions and whatnot, where, okay, this is who you are. This is what you are responsible for, as opposed to, it coming up later on when their back is against the wall and all of a sudden the past becomes just an excuse for what they've done. I mean, it sounds harsh, and I don't mean to sound harsh, but in the end, guys, I know that a lot of people may say, well, guys, they do have troubled childhood and this is what they turn into. And it's like, guys, that's not everyone. And the problem is, because it's not everyone, how do you know at that point that they're not pushed against the wall? And right now they're only saying it because in their mind, it can minimize accountability for what they've done. Am I too harsh on this, Russ?
No, I think the point is well taken. I also think that there's a point at which, they're going to have to suffer. They're going to have to suffer the sentence anyway. Right now, whether they're irretrievably lost to society or not, maybe that's for other people to decide. But maybe it's not. Maybe correctional officers, should be queried about what their insights are. Maybe they should be, utilized in a way to at least, assess what's going on with these individuals. And of course, people are going to minimize, justify, and rationalize, what they've done. And the antisocial criminal mind is going to do that more than most. I think we're all human, and we can all say that we've done that at one time or another. But they tend to engage in it all the time, under all situations, so that nothing is ever their fault, and so that they can never be held accountable for anything.
Yeah, and guys, again, it's. I'm not saying that it doesn't affect who the person could be. Of course, it could, but I think that the point when it comes out is usually because the person could be trying to minimize accountability, or you have somebody trying to write a book that believes that that's the theory that they want, because they're trying to understand the person underneath the monster.
Yeah,
And maybe what you have is just a monster, and you're just someone else that they can showcase this human side to. But sometimes, to be honest with you, and this is sad to say, and Russ kind of touched on it before, there may not be a human under that. And at the end of the day, we have to deal with the fact that this person did what they did because they're just callous and cold. Would you agree, Russ? Or
well, here's what I would say. I would say that with the academics, the practitioners, the clinicians, and so forth, those people should be aware, but often they're not. What their potential confirmation biases are. Right? You go looking for something specific in a specific, subset of these inmates, with the idea that you're going to use it to substantiate, a theory or a paper that you're doing or whatever. And by golly, you're going to find it. I guarantee it. And it may not be what you think it is. And if you go in there with these preconceptions, and we can all do this because God knows we're human, these confirmation biases will lead you in the exact wrong direction. And especially if you have a very wily inmate who is a very good manipulator, they will lead you far astray, and they will feed you all of these confirmation biases one after another, and confirm everything that you were hoping to find. And by then, you've wandered so far out of the scientific realm, and you've sacrificed objectivity to your ego. Then just how good is this book that you've published? How good is it, or this paper that you published, or this theory that you tried to derive? It's become poisoned and toxic, and it's been manipulated into something that it's not. And we see this type of thing happen a lot, or at least I think I do.
yeah, and again, guys, it's a perspective, but you got to ask yourself, when is this perspective being employed? It's being employed when there comes a moment where they got to take on full accountability. And I think when it comes to full accountability, expert manipulators, one of their big things is they like to shift. They don't want full accountability, but when they know the evidence is against them, they're going to minimize it, or they're going to, play the victim. They're going to do whatever they can, so they're seen in that perceived light, whatever perspective it is that they want. And I wanted to also add it here, and this comes with the interactions, is the observation of the manipulation tactics. So in corrections, guys, we're trained, we should be trained, and I actually written some books on it, on how to deal with manipulative behavior. And yes, it's in the context of inmate manipulation. But with that said, if you actually, really take a look at what we're teaching, it has real world application. Basically, we note that those that manipulate really have a zero care for the person that they are manipulating. And at the end of the day, their job is really to pull on one's emotions, to make them confused, to kind of make them lost, if you will. And they act on those vulnerabilities. Go ahead, Rush. You got something?
No, you're saying all that, and I'm just running back through my mind the number of times where manipulation tactics by these guys have been used on me, and I just think about it, time and time again. Everything. I've had them, try and extort me. I've had them try and threaten me. I've had them try and plead with me. I've had them try and use that whole peer thing against me, where they talk about, oh yeah, that wasn't right of this guy, or it wasn't right of my sergeant to do this, that, or the other thing. And all of these games that they play, and you go through 30 years of people playing games like that with you, and you damn well better be an expert on this, or you're so gullible that you've been used up and you really have been manipulated. And that doesn't mean that you brought in dope or anything like that, but it means that they sure got over on you.
Well, you know what, Russ, it makes sense, because through the observation, I put down that we detect the patterns of deception and manipulation. And I think that really does become a very core skill in corrections that we develop. I mean, yes, you start off with a little bit of training, and then obviously there are some books, but it's the day-to-day. And again, it's being the hyper vigilant. If you're doing your job, you are gonna be, you're going to have that universal precaution during every interaction, and you are going to ask why and why and why, and you're going to keep on asking why until you discern what the motive is. And that's what we do. And usually, I think for us, what makes correction professionals very unique in understanding the criminal mind is we get past every layer because we have to. Whatever layer, we pull it back, pull it back, pull it back, pull it back, and we're not afraid of the conflict. Also, I think what helps us out more than I think maybe people on the streets or the psychs, whatever it is that where the conflict, where we have a role that we have to play in corrections, and for the most part, the inmates know that. For the most part, they know that. For the most part, we have that perception of authority. We have a job to do. Now, don't get me wrong. If they could circumvent, they will. But for the most part, they know that we have a role to play. So we're not there to build rapport. We're not there to be their best friends. And I think that keeps us objective. I think that when they decide to try to get close and pull us out of our prescribed role, we automatically should reinforce what our position is. And that, to me, is one of the strengths that you have working in corrections. That's why you cannot allow the inmates to get too close, because once you get too close, obviously that relationship develops, and then it becomes harder to, say no and peel back the layers, because it's not an inmate I see anymore. It's Russ. We share the same sports interest, so it's another sports fan. I mean, whatever the layer of manipulation is, but the point is we don't allow that closeness. So by keeping things objective, if someone comes up and tries to play a game and I got to say no, there should be no hesitancy in my no. It should be a direct no, and I got no concerns. But Ganji, you're an inmate. I don't mean to be rude, but you're an inmate. At the end of the day, I do wish you the best. I do want you to, do good things once you get released. Of course, we all want that. But behind the wall, I need to see you as such, because if that layer gets removed, then the problem is it allows for the closeness that makes conflict a little bit more difficult. So with that said, I welcome that level of separation, which I would actually call the level of objectivity. I welcome it because it enables us to do what we need to do, which is continue to engage in needed conflict so we can go ahead and you know, commit to our correctional objectives. What's your thoughts on that, Russ?
That is the thing is putting yourself into the position where you are within the label of your authority, if you will. You know, I see a lot of people who look at officers and look at inmates from an exterior perspective, and they don't understand why we can't just, you know, go in and help those inmates, and why we can't just go in there and say, well, yeah, of course I'm going to help you do that. Yes, is the word that I should be saying all the time. And they don't understand the level of the game that's being played. And it's being played at multiple levels. You know, there are moves done by inmates, there are counter moves done by us, there are moves done by us, and there are counter moves by inmates. And so when a person sees you being a big bad meanie and just saying no, they do not understand what the object of the game is. And I kind of like hate to put it like it's a game, but really, when you understand it in the context of moves and counter moves, there's nothing else that you can call it. And so these are things that we just have to be really aware of. And I think, and even though, you know, I will say that, you know, most every corrections professional that I worked with knew and understand this to a good degree, but there were some that just never could get it. There were some that just never would understand it, and they were easily manipulated, and you know, inmates would get over on them all the time. I always wanted to be in a position that if the inmates got over, you know, it was just, hey, I'm just setting them up because that's my counter move for right now. And but there's just, you know, some that shouldn't be in this profession, that they take everything at face value. They never understand that the onion has layers, and they don't even understand that the onion is a three-dimensional object, if you will, if I can speak in a little bit of allegory there. And so we, or many of us, do recognize it and do understand it, and that's why sometimes people can be off put by the way that we approach it, because we know where the game is, and we're not afraid to throw that no word out there.
Yeah, and guys, when you train, even you know, manipulation, when you're training people to deal with this type of environment, you got to expose them to the extreme, because that's their foundation, that's their core, and then the universal precaution comes from that as a foundation. It doesn't come the other way around. It doesn't come by, you know, walking in and thinking that, you know, everybody's nice and go ahead and say yes to everything. No, you have to let them know right off the bat the real world that they're going into, and this is right in your face. This is what you could be going to. I'm not saying it's going to happen every day, but it's going to happen. And the point is you have to know what that extreme is. You have to know what those layers are, and then your universal precaution comes from how you navigate from that extreme to that middle ground, which I like to believe I operate on, Russ operates on, Joe operates on, and it's a very unique finesse. I mean, really is, guys. It's a finesse of really experience. It's no one telling you that you're going to go in on day one and get it. But with that said, because it's not something you go in day one and get, you have to start off at that extreme. You know, the finesse that we walk around with through experience happens through experience. So with that said, you couldn't expect, again, a rookie officer or a rookie correctional staff member to kind of deal with an inmate the same way that a senior staff member would. But with that said, guys, as we maneuver that finesse, that core foundation, that puts us in a very good position to understand what's in front of us at such an, I'm going to use the word intimate. I mean, it really is such an intimate level, because our survival, whether it's going to be our literally survival, our survival in general, or our professional survival, whatever it is determined by how we deal with those individuals every day. So as I said before, we're in survival mode. So we are very open and in tune with how that world maneuvers. And let me get to the next part, Russ. We talked about the manipulation tactics. Now, guys, remember, guys, manipulation tactics are very slow and subtle, and people on the outside don't recognize it. Well, we're trained from day one to recognize it. You know, we're trained from day one to recognize it. We also, I put down that we have experience with diverse offender profiles, and this is a unique setting because when everybody's trying to study one, we're in the process of studying many at one time, and in why they interact. So, I mean, guys, I have discovered that there's diverse offender profiles between different types of pedophiles, you know, depending on the ages, and it just it varies, you know. And when you're inside the prison setting, that dynamic, you know, it could set up a hierarchy, you know, and I know it's unique because, again, on the outside, you know, you may have people that try to study them as individuals, but I think that when you put them, let's say if they all commit their crimes and they go to a prison or jail, but I would say prison because prison's more long term. They start to get set in their ways. They start to accept that this could be their who they are. You don't see them amongst the good in the world. Now you see them amongst people that they can connect to some extent. You see them amongst people who also have the same type of criminal mind. And that interaction is extremely different than the interaction that you're going to see on the outside when they're dealing with the average Joe Quo. Because in here, maybe on the outside, there's a, you know, maybe a power dynamic, because you're still going to have that on the inside, but maybe there's a bit of a power dynamic here, and they're playing the game and whatever it is. But when you get into this world, they're all good at that game. So now it kind of, they either have to kind of step up, which in most cases they do, and that interaction tends to be actually pretty, I don't know if we ever looked at this before, Russ, but what we're exposed to technically is very unique, and it's not going to be seen by many. So I think that gives us definitely that elevated perspective, because we are literally observing them, I would say, within their element, within the shadows of the shadow, you know, if that makes sense. I mean, we are in there.
Yeah, I think that you know, we get to see them both at their best, maybe not their best, but at one level of their best, and certainly, you know, at their worst, and every bit of that gradient in between, if I could put it that way. Whereas generally the officers, you know, who arrest them see them perhaps, you know, only at their worst, and only at that point where, you know, they're only doing bad things, they're only being confrontational. Whereas we get to see them when they are doing those confrontational and bad things sometimes, but we also interact with them a lot of times when they are trying, you know, to move the goalposts, you know, if you will, that they're trying to work and kind of, you know, massage the situation to be able to manipulate things. And we see them at the level where, hey, maybe they are not in a mode to actually manipulate us, but maybe they are actually just having an open and honest conversation with us. And so we see them, you know, through the entirety of that. And we see, you know, all different types. You know, I've handled some of the most, you know, brutal murderers in existence, you know, on death row at San Quentin. And then, you know, just, you know, today, mostly what I deal with is I deal with these, you know, low level, you know, addicts that were involved in a whole range of crimes, but, you know, they were mostly things like, you know, stolen vehicles and, you know, and theft and things like that. And so I think that the fact that the average correctional officer deals with so many different types of criminals in so many different situations, I think it just bodes well for, you know, that deeper understanding of, you know, not from a scholastic or from an educational viewpoint, but from that, you know, that real gritty, true, behind the wall type of thing that we get to see, whether we like it or not, day in and day out. And so that's the kind of exposure that almost nobody in the real world, except for people like us, get.
And I got to tell you something. I'm just having this dialogue right now. That's something you have to appreciate. I truly do. I think that's something you have to appreciate because it teaches you so much about the world. But I do want to mention another thing, though. It's not to the point where you become paranoid when you're in the real world, but it gives you a bit of insight that most people don't have that actually helps you navigate through the real world. Now, let me get to the next part. Sorry, Russ, a little tied up there. And as I mentioned before, I talked about being underutilized in academic and criminal justice studies. I mean, listen, guys, I love the fact that there are books that we can read. I think Russ is back. Hold on, Russ, let me get you back. I love the fact that there's books that we could read that basically provide us with an understanding of, that criminal mind. But when I go to read the books, I'm actually reading these books to understand what it is I'm dealing with in the moment. So that means I'm dealing with this individual. So yes, I love the books that provide me an understanding, but through my dealings, I'm also learning something as well. And what I'm trying to do at this point, and we're going to kind of get to it here, right here. This is what matters here, is the opportunity to bridge theory and real world application. So I think when I tend to read these books, I tend to see if what's written in the book applies to what I'm doing in the real world, inside the prison. And if it doesn't apply, then we got to rewrite a whole script. And I think that I have done that. I think when I've written the books on inmate manipulation, the books on breaking boundaries, eventually maybe the books that me and Russ will write on the manipulation, guys, this isn't coming from theory. It's not coming from academia. And again, thank God we have those. I'm not minimizing that, but just bear with me. This is coming from walking on the tiers and going through that experience and then basically saying, I know theory may say this and I get it and I respect it. But for the most part, that's not what we have dealt with. What we've dealt with is this. And this is true walking the tier in their home, if you will, in their home, uncensored. So I think, to be honest with you, one of the key things about corrections, which I don't see a lot, is I'm surprised that some of the people that write these books that do have these theories on the criminal mind, I'm surprised they don't try to see how those theories could play out with those that are working in the correction setting to see if this is what they see. So again, they may interview someone who's committed a crime and believe that they have a total understanding of who that individual is. Well, how? Well, we interviewed their neighbors. We interviewed their family. So everyone that they manipulated. So if you've interviewed everyone that was around them that they manipulated, and then you're going to try to ask them, do they know who this real person is? Have you ever tried to interview somebody that was in the prison that maybe could have been his cellmate or maybe could have been his officer or their counselor? Maybe that would be a good person to interview to some extent, because I think that at this point here, they're not able to play a game as easily as they were to those on the outside. I mean, when you watch some of these specials, and you see that someone is able to kill 39 people and their whole family is shocked by it and they didn't know, wow, that's crazy. I didn't expect that from them. But then you're going to try to go to them to get a real input of who that person is. They don't know. They only know the portrayal of how that person wanted to be seen. But if you went now, like Russ said, Russ worked on death row. And Russ worked on death row for years. Now, if you went ahead and said, okay, we talked to the family, whatnot, and we get an understanding of how he wanted to be seen by everyone. But now, Russ has been working this unit with this inmate, let's say, for the last 4 or 5 years. He's seen this inmate interact with many. Russ has also had issues with the inmate, whatever it is. Why don't we start asking Russ who this person is? Because Russ has experience within that element that the situation itself can expose. And what I mean by that, guys, is if you look at them from the outside world, they can create narratives that they can control to sell to those that are closest to them, because the last thing they want to do is believe that the person that they trusted is this monster. So they have control of the narrative. They have control of the situation. So, they're going to be able to paint a perspective that they want. But once you put them into that prison setting, now the situation, all that stuff is not under their control. It's not. It's situationally driven. And the people that are involved in that, I believe, have the best insight into seeing who that person is, because even if they're trying to hide it, that person will get exposed. And that's something that I think, as experienced people in corrections, that gives us tremendous insight. And I'm surprised we're not utilized more in academia. And the reason why I'm thinking we may not be utilized, Russ, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, is because, like today's dialogue, we may present an opposing view.
To the oops.
I got you.
Okay, there. When we go to that umbrella that I talked about earlier about confirmation bias. Another way to look at confirmation bias is just cherry picking. And it's only acknowledging and only seeing those things that fit the model that you were hoping to see, and it's ultimately self-defeating. I think that the best thing that we could be would be a resource to try and understand the populations as a whole, in order to maybe present better things with regards to practices that could be undertaken, because ultimately what we want is we want better public safety. And so part of better public safety is making sure that people that are being returned to the real world, as it were, are either fit or have been given some type of skill sets to be able to get out there. I don't necessarily think that correctional officers should be the ones giving them the skill sets, but I think that we need to be consulted on the things that are going on out there that really, in my view, are not helping. They're making things worse for a lot of these inmates and probationers and parolees and what have you, because gosh, here, I'll get in trouble for saying this, I guess, but there's just a lot of do-gooders out there that think that they're doing good, and they're really not. They're doing things that are antithetical to that good, by letting the inmates, the probationers, the parolees, whatever you want to call them, whatever subset that they fit in, letting them get away with figurative, if not literal, murder. And it's just constantly stepping back away from the precipice of accountability, because somebody's feelings are going to get hurt over it. And it just kind of really rankles me, when I see them doing things like this Proposition 6 in California, that is taking it out of the hands of corrections and making a law about it. And no matter how bad that law is, no matter how much it's going to actually hurt public safety, it's going to hurt inmate safety, and it's going to destroy the motivators for even doing anything with regards to reentry and rehabilitation. These people are just they're screwing around with things that they have no idea what they're doing. And they're just doing it in the name of, well, this is going to make the inmates feel better. Well, that's not exactly a kindness. That's actually a cruelty to people who otherwise could be held accountable, who could be making restitution, who could be involved in defraying some of the cost of having to lock them up, because they do present such a threat to society. I mean, what are these people? What are some of these people in California, the politicians and so forth, thinking? Well, they're not thinking; they're pandering. So anyway, I'll get off my high horse now. But
no, but Russ, I agree. I think that for us, even when we have this dialogue, I mean, in the corrections profession, we do have to be objective. We do have to believe that, people can change for the most part. And I do. I believe that people can, because I believe the work of the people that do it. With that said, I also know the truth is that not everybody will or wants to. Let's just do it that way. Not everybody wants to. I mean, that's even a harder push. We're told that, we're going to put program into a world that most people may not accept that program, but we try. I mean, it's what we do. That's pretty much what we do on a routine. But with that said, I think that because we're not as emotionally involved in the result of the research to some extent, or we're not that emotionally involved with the individual who's been caught up, we do provide a somewhat unbiased, but we still need also somewhere in the middle. So maybe that's where you have the extremes meet, because I do believe that we also may have some bias in us because for how we're trained. We're trained, as I said, to see the worst, and it makes sense. We have to, because unfortunately, we have to always be prepared to see the wolf. But at the end of the day, is we don't treat people as if they're the worst. We try to treat them where they need to be treated, and we're just prepared in case it goes the other way. But I think this does make for a great dialogue, because I think that there's a balance here. The balance comes from, the difference between what's out there and the perspective that they control, the narrative they control, and what we can see when the situation becomes dominant. And I will say, even when we talked about Wade Wilson before, the reason why I felt that it was so easy to break down the dialogue he had with his dad was because I've lived through those type of dialogues with inmates. I've seen, that type, that the way they sell a story and when they want to get something, and I've seen people fall for it hook, line, and sinker. Even if I'm not having the dialogue, I've seen it play out in front of me multiple times. And it's funny because when you see these situations, you're pulled in because you can kind of relate to it. Because it's like I've seen this played out, 10 million times in the course of my 20-something year career. And the one last part I want to cover is frontline access to evolving inmate behaviors and trends. I think this is something that is probably one of the most important things we'll touch on today, which is basically we see where the criminal mind is going. Now, with that said, I can add something right now that I believe is a lot different than it was maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. What I see right now that's coming across that's maybe more of a trending thing is I see entitlement a lot more than I've ever seen before. I mean, yes, of course we had, maybe inmates that would advocate stuff like that. I get it. Advocating, of course, there's something's wrong, of course. But now it's more of an entitlement. And I think that makes it hard for even us to manage, because somewhere along the entitlement comes the fact that they feel that they're justified in what they do, including the wrong behavior. And that's what happens when we buy into those excuses or those justifications. When we start buying into that, then they start to believe that it's okay or it's not their fault at a lesser scale. So again, if we interview someone and it gets to the point where we need them to take responsibility or accountability, and it gets to a point where they're trapped and they're back to the wall and they start kind of throwing out every excuse that they can as to why they've done it. So we know they've done it, but as to why they've done it, and we accept those excuses at face value, it's like there's some level of understanding that's provided back to that inmate that now inmate now feels that, maybe my behavior wasn't that bad. Maybe I'm the victim here. Ultimately, sure, I've killed 37 people, but what happened to me 30 years ago, now I'm the victim. And it's crazy because when they do these interviews, in some cases, Russ, when they do these interviews, they have to be very careful that they don't do anything that can make the inmate want to end the interview. So they're very careful of what they say. They're very careful of how they say it, because at any moment the inmate could say, I'm done. I don't want this inmate. I don't want this interview anymore because this is not the perspective I want out there. So at this point here, I'm going to go ahead and cancel the interview. I don't want the interview no more. We're done. Now, with that said, when it's us and we're dealing with them, the inmate doesn't have the ability to do that. The inmate doesn't have the ability to say, you know what, stop. That's not how I want to be seen. I don't want this officer in my unit anymore. No, it doesn't work that way anymore. The moment the person engages in conflict, we go ahead and bring it right back respectfully. And there's no point where the inmate has control to end that dialogue, that meeting. And I think for now, as I said, Russ, the biggest trend is the way the system is moving is we are pushing more towards entitled inmates who now believe that whatever they've done, they're able to provide an excuse that minimizes accountability and allows for them to say, you know what, it's not my fault. It never was my fault. And when you start to paint that picture, by the way, here's the scary thing, guys. When you start to paint that picture and you find you accept their excuses for their behavior that allows them to minimize accountability, then they start to get the idea that maybe they don't belong inside the prison setting. And now the control that we're supposed to have over them also lessens because in their mind, they're wrongfully there. Is that extreme, Russ, or is that kind of paint out where we're headed a little bit?
No, I think that that's exactly on point, and especially, if you start to look, at what the current, zeitgeist, if you will, of society looks like, with all of these, sub branches of different. Oh gosh, what is the terminology I'm trying to look at? These special groups and things, and the way that things are, presented online and within
You mean like these
social
advocate
media.
groups?
Yeah, some of them being the advocate groups, and so forth, and the way that they've really truly hijacked the language in order to try and portray things. There may be no greater example of that than when we take a look at things like wokeism and so forth, and it just kind of like completely destroys anyone having accountability for anything. Depending on which alleged, group or subgroup or whatever that you belong to, and it just makes people where some people can be held accountable and some people can't, and it's just all about all of these different terminologies that they throw out there, and like I said, the overall zeitgeist of our society right now. And so I don't know. I think it's just a hard thing to pick apart because these inmates, they really are entitled, and they really do take on that persona, or at least they use the words and the neuro-linguistic programming, if you will, of being a victim, and more so than ever, there's justification, rationalization, and everything else that they can come up with to make it okay what they've done, and I deal with that absolutely on a daily basis, and I think that the Wade Wilson, kind of an extreme case because he actually killed people and so forth. But when it comes back down to just more of my garden variety felon, I mean, every single day I'm confronted with people who, they had a hard childhood. Their mother was an addict, or their father was an addict, or they started smoking, dope when they were 8 years old. And to be sure, these things are shocking, or should shock the conscience. But they wear that as a badge of, I'm entitled to do what I did because of what affronted me in the past. And so when you have that type of mindset, the thing that I try and get across to them is this idea about extreme ownership. It's not anybody else's fault. It's not probation Officer Smith's, it's not on him that you screwed up this time. He wasn't pushing you too hard. He wasn't the reason that you had a dirty test. It wasn't the court system. It wasn't the arresting officer. It wasn't me. It was all on you. And this is something I think that has always been there with regards, but in this day and age, for whatever reason, um, the acceptance of responsibility is fought tooth and nail, if you will, by the subset that we've had for the longest time, which is the antisocial criminal mindset. And so now making any headway with regard to reentering real rehabilitation is really difficult. But I think a lot of that we can perhaps lay at the feet of some of the politicians and maybe management, administration, what have you, that has just abandoned accountability and tried to tell us that the evidence-based practices of the past are no good. But because accountability hurts people's feelings. But maybe that's just my perspective, but it's kind of one of the things that, I've discovered along the way in this journey of mine, from crime fighter to whatever I am currently at the time, to, someone who's trying to positively impact society by doing some reentry and rehabilitation work, if you will.
Yeah, and Russ, I've seen programs that are done where the inmates may try to bring up past, and then the person running the program will be like, excuses, and then they're trying to get them off that so they can, kind of take onus of what they've done, so they can have an honest move forward. And I think that is key, and that's kind of what we discussed here. Like, I mean, I think that the big thing about dealing with the individuals that we deal with behind the prison wall is the fact that at any moment we have to be wary that they could decide to take control or dominate. And at the end of the day, they've done it before. So we go on universal precaution. And when we enter and we provide conflict, the layers get exposed and we discover who those people really are. And then why not take what we've learned and then provide those lessons elsewhere? Because, it's great that we can discover why a murderer did what they did after the fact. That's great. But what are we providing anything that's actionable to the people who could be dealing with it in the moment? And that's what we do. We deal with it in the moment. We walk right in and we deal with it in the moment. And I think that's the lessons that we could provide to the outside world. And I think that's a book that has to be written. And to be honest with you, Russ, with our level of understanding what it is behind that wall with the books we've done, I actually think we may be the only people that could write something like that, or could really do. I mean, we've done videos on this that expose the tactics, but I truly do think that we need to really have a sit down, maybe even work with someone who, if they're watching now, that's on the the mental health side, that's looking to publish a book that's never been done before. So maybe you get your hands on both of us and we could try to see where that bridge could meet. And I think that would be great. Correctional staff working with a mental health professional to come up with a book that really dives into the criminal mind from so many different angles, including getting in their face and not giving them what they want and what happens next. Russ, anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, I think this is a great dialogue. Definitely one that needs to be had. Anyone out there who wants to know more, feel free to reach out. This conversation, just like all of our conversations, does not end here tonight. It's something that we will pick up again at some point, and maybe with a guest that has a special, interest in this subject. For all the people out there, on the lines and stuff, open your eyes, open your ears, be sensitive to what's going on in the inmate population around you. You can use this to tremendous leverage with regards to making an impact on safety and security. And just remember, man, nobody sees these guys like you do. Nobody. And so use that to your advantage.
Yeah, and guys, We'll do some more videos later in the week, but I just wanted to get this topic out there because if anybody has a question, we put it out there. And again, it's not perfect. I mean, obviously, we do have to welcome the other side, just like the other side should welcome us. But sometimes we have these dialogues. We've been in the dark for so long that there's emotion and passion behind it that doesn't truly mean to come out as one-sided. But sometimes it could seem that way. And then we kind of fall back a little bit and say what we really mean. And then we try to bring about a more objective approach. But this is definitely something I felt worth revisiting because I felt that people challenge the experience by throwing academia out there. And it's like, guys, I'm hoping that people that are in academia have experience, and if they don't, then I find it hard to, be in that classroom and teaching people how to navigate around that world when you yourself haven't been in it. So the perfect blend is always going to be, yes, experience in academia, yes, but if you only able to get one, it's experience. Experience will supersede academia any day of the week because there's nothing like the lessons you learn when you're out there doing it. I just can't say it. So if you want to teach me, then be out there with me and then get the experience, and we'll come back and we'll exchange stories, if you will. As always, guys, the show is tipped up. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. Bell's going to notify every time I post a video. Stay safe.